My name is Jonathan Haynes, and I am from Brooklyn, New York, second American in a row. And I've been in the technology space for around a decade or so, most of which has been in some sort of design capacity. I've worked with bigger companies, smaller companies. At the moment, I'm at a startup, so I'm wearing many different types of hats. I'm doing a lot of research, but then also visual design, some implementing testing as well. And it's a very different type of company to be at because you're basically trying to figure out what the best way to advance the company's lifespan moving forward. So what my company does, it's a property technology company, and it digitizes data and speeds up the process for multifamily renovations. So it is dealing with houses and apartments and taking that data and improving these properties. So what am I going to be talking about today is the great challenge of designing at a growing company. A growing company could be, anything from a startup. It could be a 10-person company. It could be a 30 to 50-person company that's basically just making some advances in terms of headcount and trying to figure out their next step. And companies experience growing pains at all times. I think that it's very difficult for a company to go from a small company to a large company and not experience any issues. And at the same time, we are definitely in an environment that is not friendly towards job seekers, but also people that are currently in a role that they like. Layoffs are happening a lot, and unfortunately, once you do get the role, there's this growing challenge of trying to remain relevant in that job because there's a lot of applicants that are coming looking for your role. So how can we kind of remain relevant in a design-related position knowing this? So why is this even a topic for a designer? Well, design, as we may know, is something that's oops, there we go. It's something that's like you don't really notice it until something is very wrong. This webpage right here is definitely purposely designed very poorly. And because it's purposely designed the way it is, it brings your attention to it. When things are designed right, it's very easy to miss the design because great design, when done well, is invisible, as mentioned by Jared Spool. So it's definitely something that's it's kind of like you want to be as invisible as possible, but you also kind of want to let people know that you are the person responsible for the good work that you're doing, the good research, the good visual design, the testing, whatever kind of data that you're providing. So when you're not doing the job right, it is noticeable, and when you're doing the job right, it may be invisible. So a lot of what this talk is we're going to go through tips in remaining relevant and making sure that people are aware of what you're doing so that it could foolproof you at this growing company. All right, so what do others think that we do? This is very much a joke, but at the same time, to a certain extent, there is a conglomerate of people out there that think that a designer is basically a person that is making some pictures. They're drawing stuff. They are pixel pushers, if you will. This is simplifying design in a huge way. Obviously, as we heard from the previous two talks, there's a lot of research that goes into design. There's also a lot of testing. There's also a lot of management of design systems and creating variables and components and everything that goes into style guides, branding. So design is definitely not something that's simplified to, as we could see in the picture, drawing some pictures. But at the same time, from the outside in, if design looks very simple, this is what it could look like. So design can seem seamless, and this is the work that goes into things like design systems could be completely missed. So if you are basically just doing your good work and that's it, it actually isn't enough. You need to be on people's minds, and you need to let people know that you exist. A phrase that I have heard in describing kind of like remaining relevant with your with your current position or your job is that a closed mouth does not get fed. It basically means that if you are, just doing your work and staying quiet, it's very likely that people aren't aware of what you're doing. So it doesn't exactly mean to boast about all of your accomplishments, but at the same time, you do want to let people know that you are responsible for the good work that goes into X, Y, Z. And this remains true for people that even that you don't interact with. So people on different teams, for example, if you are only staying in your lane, staying in your silo and only dealing with your product manager, or maybe your developers or something along those lines, then there's a whole sales team that doesn't know about your work, or there's a whole customer success team that doesn't know about your work. So doing as much as you can to kind of remain on their minds as well, and know that you are the go-to person for your expertise, whether it be research or visual design or whatever it is. So let's back up a little bit and let's talk about UX as a whole. Why exactly is UX important? We probably all know why UX is important because this is our livelihood. This is the line of work that we have chosen to pursue. But UX, in a 10-year span, the value of what happens with the company goes up if they have design focus, UX focus, if they're kind of making sure that they are planning for longevity as opposed to something that's a very short-term sprint and basically just doing feature bloating or something along those lines. So companies that do hire designers early or focus on UX early tend to do a little bit better, as you can see by this chart. But at the same time, this isn't a 10-year span. So a 10-year span, like in 10 years, a company can go out of business. In 5 years is way too long. And 1 year may be too long for certain companies. So even though design does represent a long-term solution, it also depends on how much patience your investors or the C-suite people at your company, the CEO, CTO, whoever it is. It's all about kind of like how much patience that they have to wait for this 10-year span for the fruits of what you're putting in place to really take effect. So why don't companies hire UXers early? We talked a little bit about it in the last slide, but there are other reasons. I think that's, if you haven't seen this Venn diagram, I think that this is something that in startup life is extremely relevant all the time. The way that it works is there are three separate circles. You have the good circle, the fast circle, and the cheap circle, red, green, and blue. And you can only choose 2 of these circles. If you are a really good company, unicorn company, sometimes you could choose 3, but it's definitely increasingly hard. So a lot of times the company is forced to kind of choose 2 of these 3. And unfortunately, the 2 that they usually choose is that things have to be fast because there's no patience for waiting for that 10-year growth. And things have to be cheap because growing companies, new companies, they may not have the funding to kind of like pay for something at a premium. So investors many times want to see tangible results early, so they choose something fast. And even if they are going from seed to Series A to Series B to Series C, it only gives you a certain amount of money to play with, and there's a lot of growth that happens with the company. So sometimes that means that they can't spend top dollar on a UX designer because they would much rather spend it somewhere else. Why is that? Because designers, as we mentioned, good designers may seem a little bit more invisible than we like. All right, so what is the cost of UX? Growing companies need to fail fast. Research and design takes time to iterate. So not only are you paying in dollar, but you're also paying in time. And basically, this is what the curve looks like. The red curve is basically how the requirements of when a company starts. If they don't kind of like take care of changes early on, the cost of those changes goes up drastically, as you can see on the right side of this chart. However, on the left side, if we take care of design very early, and we basically handle the information architecture, if we handle the design system, if we handle all of those hard things up front, it really pays dividends a little bit later on, because then you're not wasting time of the developers, you're not wasting time of getting the exact UI right. So it does save time, it does save money, but as we mentioned before, this stuff takes time, and a lot of times a company, especially a growing company, doesn't really have the time to wait for that. So now we'll talk a little bit about human psychology. This is an older graph, but I do still like it. It's a graph that basically shows fitness centers in, I believe it's UX centric, but it's relevant for pretty much anywhere, I would say. And basically, what it's saying is that in January of the year, people usually tend to really like to go to the gym and work out and really focus on their fitness, because January is a time of new beginnings. It's the time to kind of like basically just say it's new me, new you, whatever it is, and basically just put your front foot forward and really make an effort to change something that you wanted to change about yourself from the year prior. And usually what happens is new customers start in January, but as you could see, by February, there's already a dip. Planet Fitness is just one example. It's the most drastic example, that once we get into February, the new customers start waning because it's no longer January. They're no longer new customers, but at the same time, all right. So basically, this also happens in May and June, as you could see here. Equinox is a little bit more high end of a gym. And what we see happens is people start going to Equinox once the summer is approaching because they want to basically have the best body possible. But that too wanes as far as new customers because it's no longer something that's super relevant to them as the summer moves on. So what does this mean exactly? Well, human beings are a little bit more wired to be short-term thinkers. Unfortunately, the way that we kind of evolved over time, millions of years ago, was to be focused on surviving the day as opposed to planning for a 401k. So long-term is great, but it's very hard to conceptualize. And an example of this would be there is an experiment called the 1 cookie now or 2 cookies later experiment. It's usually done on children. I don't know if it's still prevalent these days. But basically, a child is given 1 cookie, and the adult leaves the room, and the child is basically told that they could have 1 of these cookies now, or if they wait 5 minutes, they could have 2 cookies instead of 1. And instead of waiting for the cookie to get double two cookies, a lot of the children can't wait, and they basically just have 1 cookie. So that is with children, but unfortunately it still is relevant for adults. And adults also tend to kind of not know how to plan for the future as opposed to just being short-term thinkers. So the Agile Hydra is basically just, I have a little bit of a delay. The development process usually follows this sort of process. We have the PMs that lead to the designers, and the designers give their designs to developers. And usually what this means is that the 3 of these different factions are supposed to work together. The PM is supposed to set the role of where you're supposed to go, what you're supposed to implement, where you're basically supposed to kind of be in the next sprint or so. And the designer is supposed to take those plans and put them into something visual. And then a developer is supposed to take the blueprint set by the designer and turn that into a construction, building a house, if you will. So that is how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to look a little bit like this, like a fierce Hydra, where all 3 heads of the Hydra are running on all cylinders and really demonstrating power like all over the place. However, because of this issue where design is invisible and design takes too much time to really show the fruits of its labor, a lot of times, maybe not a lot of times, but sometimes companies could end up looking a little bit more like this, where the PMs and the developers are actually showing physical things where the designer is kind of like unable to kind of like show something as concrete as what the developer or the PM is able to do. So what we can do is basically plan tactics to show that designers are not just pixel pushers, that we actually solve problems. And just one more time, just remember that design is a long-term solution. And now what we're going to do is talk about a few different tactics that we could go through in showing that showing the rest of the company that designers are problem solvers, and that we could actually do more than just color pictures and push pixels. All right, so the first tactic would be to know the right people. You know, if you have an org chart, if you know basically who your manager is, but also your PM's manager, your developer's manager, if you know all aspects of what a company or how a company looks from an org chart perspective, it's important to basically just like have an audience with anyone that you could kind of find relevant to design. If you get buy-in with the right kinds of people, they will always look to you as the expert in the design fields. And that's basically what you want to do. You want to be the person that they think of when they need something design related. This is also, there's a concept called eat the frog, which basically means that you want to do the thing that your manager doesn't want to do. This doesn't necessarily have to be your manager, but you know, one example would be, let's say that the CEO doesn't like to you know, own a certain meeting or something like that. If you take that meeting from him and then you run it your own way, that's one way of eating the frog. But basically, it's just taking something that is displeasurable for someone and doing it so that they don't have to. All right. Another thing that could be done is basically making sure that a growing company stays in touch. If you do work remotely, or if you work in the office, there are ways to basically showcase what design is doing. This is one of those ways of doing it. You know, this could be through GChat or Teams, or you know, whatever you do use. Slack is another one of these tools. And basically what you want to do is, if your company has something like all hands meetings, or just some sort of meeting where the company is getting together, use that as a platform for you know, showing off what design does. If you have a design team, get your design team together and basically tell everyone, this is what design does. This is what we do. This is the design system we're working on. These are the things that we want to accomplish in the next few months. Growing companies especially want to have things like this, because they want to show company unity, and they want to kind of like showcase that the company is growing. So, you know, reaching out to whoever is in charge of these sorts of meetings, they probably would be pretty happy to have you. And these are basically just like other things that you can kind of talk about. So what exactly is design making? What exactly is a design system? And, you know, what is the plan for the next year or the next month even? And basically go from there, you know, choose your own adventure for what you want to tell. And, you know, so using that meeting you could catapult it to other endeavors. One of the things that I did with my design team at my current role is we did have one of these meetings, and from there we basically made a Slack channel called Design Postbox. And the Design Postbox is basically just sort of like a nonsense Slack channel, like a fun Slack channel where people could kind of put their recommendations in, or if they're a little confused with some sort of designs. It's basically sort of a post box for the design team to kind of look into things that people are seeing. If this works for your company, if your company is way too big, then it probably wouldn't work. But if it is a company that's only, you know, 30 to 50 people, let's say, it might be a good way to do that. Oops, sorry. And you could also do this to showcase milestones or design decisions. Maybe if there is an update to the brand guidelines or something along those lines, this is a really good way of doing so. The next thing is internal research, and the image on the right side is a value proposition canvas, and it's a really awesome way to basically just when you are dealing with any sort of clients, let's say, they are experiencing some sort of problem, they have some pain points, and by using something like a value proposition canvas, you're basically figuring out a way that you can take those pains that they have and turn them into something positive. So by using this value prop canvas, you could basically turn it into something with your coworkers. So stay in contact with your team and figure out ways of helping them. The sales team, for example, they are talking to customers a lot. They're probably on the phone with the best customers that they could possibly that you could possibly talk to. So if there is a way that you could talk to those customers, that's great. And if not, then become friends with the sales team and make sure that you are aware of the things that they're hearing on the other end of that phone. So that's a really good way of making sure that you're taking care of those pain points. And then another thing would be the developers. If developers have a hard time kind of like deciphering designs, maybe what you need to do is talk to the developers and figure out the best way for them to understand how to organize Figma, for example, or if they need, we'll talk about this in a little bit, like a video, like a Loom video to kind of explain things. So this could be another way of staying in contact with the people around you to make sure that they are aware of what you're doing. And as I mentioned, Loom could be another really, Loom could be another really important way to make sure that you are staying in touch with your coworkers and staying relevant in design. And what Loom can do is basically just record you going through a prototype, talking through a design decision, talking through research, for example. These are all ways that the design team could basically just make sure that people are aware of the work that the design team is doing. And facilitate workshops regularly. This is something recent that some people that I do work with are, they're not designers. They're still a little unsure of how Figma works. So just having short workshops, going through what Figma does, if even just the basics of how it works. Doesn't have to be Figma, it could be other tools that we use as well. But basically just walking through how Figma works and how you use Figma as a design team. How do you organize files? These are all just ways of basically inviting them into your into the things that you're doing and making sure that they're aware of how to do the things that you that you do, basically. And just one more time. One more time. Design is basically a long-term goal, right? You're not going to see the benefits of design overnight. This is basically a long-term thing. However, if it is long-term, that's okay, because there are strategies that you could put into place day by day to basically just let people know that there are things that you can be doing so that people are aware of what the design team can be doing. And that's basically it. So thank you so much. And these are just a few of the links to find me if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, or I have a design-related Instagram as well if you want to follow that. And that's basically it. I'm sorry about the microphone, by the way.
No problem at all. Thank you very much, Jonathan. That was really interesting. It's so continuous, the value of UX and design, research and design. But it's great to always think of different ways that it can be tackled and trying to be improved. So thank you for sharing.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Excellent. So if anybody has any questions, please do comment. Shelby has noted just around the eating the frog, she was saying that it used to be about tackle the hardest problem of your day first, so that you have capacity for the others, like the big rock, little rock kind of metaphor. But yeah, she thinks the other approach of your manager's job as well is a good way of looking at it. Great. So one of the things, and I am intimately familiar with the challenges of trying to sell kind of the value of doing research and design up front, because there is the bias towards just building and just getting something out the door. And what I always think of is, unless it's linked to a manager's KPI, they're putting their neck on the line to trust you. and that's a dangerous game to play, because it just needs one change of a manager and then all your good work is gone. So is there any KPIs that you're aware of that you can kind of, for your manager to say, this will improve your KPI, so it can be a bit more tangible and hopefully less kind of subject to a change just as one person leaves?
I mean, that's a good question. I think that like that's basically the goal, right? You want to kind of back up what you're doing with data, because if you're not, then it's sort of like, well, how do we know? How do we know that in 10 years or 5 years or whatever it is that this is actually going to work? I think that what you can do is something that I'm trying to do now is implement better testing for our products. I think that it's a relatively small user base. So testing is not, it's kind of like not as important because you can't get as many insights, but at the same time, it's more important because you could see just so much more like as something grows. And I think that kind of having, if even just a small sample size of this is where we were 1 week and this is where we are the next week, taking it apart from kind of like a manager's KPI and just having it as kind of like the value of the product's KPI even. Because you're right. Like, I think that when things are attached to a manager, it can be great. It can be great as like for the amount of time that that manager is around and relevant and whatnot. But once that manager leaves the company or gets transferred to a different department, that could really leave you in a bad spot. So I think that like having either multiple manager KPIs or attaching the success of what you're doing to the product itself and backing it up with data, that's really like the best strategy, I would say. But there's definitely others as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's it's a good idea to have a little bit of a backup, because I have unfortunately seen it go backwards in more than one company when a champion leaves or moves on, as you say, and then the new person is more about delivery. So it can be a bit challenging. I think that's all of the questions that I have, but I just wanted to thank you once again for sharing. I thought that was really insightful, and thanks to all of our speakers for sharing.
Thank you so much for having me.